Take Back Your Health Now, Episode 2. You're listening to the Take Back Your Health Now podcast, the show that interviews the top doctors, athletes, trainers, and entrepreneurs to help you find the Holy Grail of health. Now here's your host, Dr. Dan Margolin.
Hello, this is Dr. Dan Margolin with the next episode of Take Back Your Health Now, where we pull out all the stops in search of the Holy Grail of health. Today's guest is Randy Hetrick. He is the creator of the suspension trainer, perhaps the most prolific piece of exercise equipment in the history, and the founder of TRX, one of the world's leading training brands. Over the past 3 decades, Randy built a record of unique accomplishments, including collegiate athlete, 14-year Navy SEAL officer, bootstrap entrepreneur, multi-patented inventor, and growth company CEO, whose company earned multiple placements on the rosters of the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies and Outside Magazine's best places to work. Randy, man, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Dan. My pleasure.
Awesome. So, Randy, let me ask you a question, man. How do you think the Navy set you on a path for fitness?
Oh, well, I mean, hey, being a Navy SEAL, or most of the other special ops guys fall in the same category, you're sort of a professional athlete in uniform. You know, you usually get there because you grew up in athletics, and you stay there because you love, you love doing hard things in the physical realm. So it was kind of a natural fit for me.
Sure. What was it? Let me ask you a question. What was it like when you first you went in to become a Navy SEAL, like the training and stuff like that? Was it, even though you're in good shape, or was it sort of surprising how difficult it was, or you were prepared for it, or?
Well, I mean, I did the best that I could to prepare for it. I'd grown up as an athlete. I was a wrestler, and then in college I was a rower. So I had a pretty good background in miserable sports that require a lot of fortitude and not a lot of crowd approval. So I suppose I was prepared in that respect. But man, the one thing that the SEAL selection process is great for is they're gonna put it on you no matter who you are or what you show up with in the way of physical talent, and I certainly got my money's worth.
Oh, I bet you did. Well, let me ask you, Ray, where did this idea of the suspension trainer come from? Like, how did you get involved with that? How did you come up with it?
Well, we were, in the middle of the 90s, we were deploying a lot to a lot of different places, and it was easy to stay in shape back in, when we were back in the States and had a world-class gym and, a couple hours a day to train at least. But then when you deploy abroad, there weren't any of those assets. And so I was on a operation over in Southeast Asia, actually, looking at the underway ship mission, the counter-piracy mission, where you got to climb the side of a freighter with a bunch of weight on your back. And I ended up, just by happenstance, I had taken off and had my jiu-jitsu belt accidentally stuffed in my bag, and I ended up just coming up with an idea to tie a knot in the end of it, throw it over a door in this little warehouse, and lean back against gravity and start lifting my body to train the climbing muscles. And it worked. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. And I made a couple modifications and discovered that, wow, wait a minute, this is really interesting, this crazy little harness that I've created. And, one thing led to another, and I knew how to sew, because all old SEALs learn how to sew when you first get into the community so that you can modify your gear. And
Sure.
And I ended up just tinkering away and creating something that the guys thought was pretty cool.
So when you're looking at other types of workouts where you're lifting weights and things like that, how does this differ? How does it affect the muscles or the structure differently?
Well, there's some really interesting things about suspension training. Working against gravity is a basic human condition, right? It doesn't matter what you do, or whether you're a pro athlete or whether you're, just coming off a hip surgery. The idea of integrating balance and strength and being able to move your body through space and control it with a strong core and strong stabilizers, in your hips and your knees and your ankles, that's a pretty broad need. And it turns out that The suspension trainer does that for you. It lets users of all different levels and abilities, some people use the straps as a stabilizer, literally almost as as an assist to do things like a body weight squat. And then other people use it for a completely different reason, because you can create some environments that are really, really challenging for the higher end athlete. And for somebody who's coming off of surgery, or maybe he's getting a little older and struggling with balance, it can provide a safety net. So it's a pretty unique tool.
It's funny you're mentioning core. I was in a car accident about a year ago, and I got hit from behind. Not that hard, but it really shook my back up. And I realized at that point that part of the problem wasn't the car accident. It wasn't. I hadn't necessarily strengthened my core as much as it could be. I've always sort of lifted weights, but I've never done it more balanced. It was always more like upper body and stuff. I've never used your products, but I could see just in you discussing it, it makes sense, right? It would seem like it would strengthen all the muscles at the same time. Do you get bodybuilders and people that are normally lifting weights a great deal using your product?
Well, back when I first brought it to market, the answer was no. People are creatures of habit, and so when I would first show it to weightlifters, they would look at it and sort of squint at me and say, like, "Do you see me here with all this muscle mass? I lift heavy." but then I would say, "All right, tough guy, come here for a minute," and I'd put them on it. And one of the things that's really unique, and it does trouble me, Dan, that you're not a TRXer yet, but we're going to fix that.
Fair enough.
It really focuses on the stabilizers. So because it's not on a track and it's not on a hinge, there's a lot, the straps will move any way that your body will move. And by manipulating your angle with relation to the ground, you can apply relatively more of your weight onto the straps, which you have to lift as resistance, or relatively less. And it's very easy to adjust just by moving your foot position. So
right.
It's an interesting, now we have a big following with powerlifting and bodybuilders, because they've realized that a lot of what they're doing works the big prime muscles, right? The pecs or maybe the quads, but they tend to lack strength and stability through the joints. And that's something that suspension training does really, really well.
Well, it's one of the things that I just was wondering too, like as you age, right, there's certain muscles that'll tend to be, I guess, atrophy from lack of use and stuff like that. What do you find as people age they're running into mostly in terms of their health, in terms of their workouts, those kind of things?
Probably the the number one enemy of longevity and function is, becoming sedentary. If you don't keep moving, you lose the ability to move. And it's a very interesting thing. I'm sure that you see this in your practice, right? When someone has maybe an overuse injury, or they injure their foot, and then in healing they become inactive, and then that just causes further atrophy and more inactivity, and it's this vicious spiral. And generally, what we see from aging athletes through regular folks, hip mobility decreases, and the postural muscles that stand you upright from the base of your skull down to the tip of your tailbone, those tend to atrophy. And so you end up seeing people whose stance gets narrower and narrower as they age, and then they start to stoop. And those things are simply from lack of performing the movements that you performed as a kid, and then through your young adulthood, and all the way up. As lifestyle changes as you age, there's less and less reason to do a lot of that stuff. And then if you mix in an injury, along the way, or some kind of a health crisis that takes you out of the game for a while, it can become this self-fulfilling prophecy. So we really like the fact that, the suspension trainer, you can use it anywhere. You hook it up to your fence in the backyard, or throw the door anchor over a door in your house, and you're in business. You start doing some of those movements to mobilize the hips, to strengthen the low back, the mid back, strengthen the upper shoulders and neck, and you can really turn somebody around pretty quickly.
So, right, you're saying what I've sort of noticed. I mean, I see this in some patients, right? You get some patients in here that are 70 years old or 60 years old, and they look 70 or 60 years old. And then every once in a while, you get that person that comes in, and you're like, there's no way that they're the age that chart says. You know what I mean? And so what you're saying, I guess, is that you don't necessarily have to age the way a lot of people want you to believe that you do. It's really the attention that you start putting on yourself. Is that
I'm
true?
a huge believer in that, Dan. I think that, I mean, look, there's no denying that there are certain factors that change with age, but those factors can be significantly slowed, the aging process, through activity and good diet. And it truly is the case that if you don't use it, you lose it. And conversely, if you're using your body and keeping your machine intact, the degradation to your function is actually slowed massively. I mean, I just turned 51 this year, and while I can't, I can perform at the level that I could as a 28, 30-year-old SEAL.
Wow.
I just can't do it day after day after day after day. Right. That's the difference.
Right.
So I have to make accommodations, and I have to warm up and make sure, because some of the elasticity in my tissues has declined a bit. So I have to take a little more time to warm up, have to make sure that I've done my active mobility stuff before I start doing power work or speed work. But once I'm warm, I can perform more or less the level that I did as a 28, 29-year-old. And that's simply because I never stopped, ever.
Right. Randy, that's also like a mindset. I meet so many people. I mean, I remember meeting a guy in his 20s when I was in my 20s, and I said, "How's things going?" And he said, "I'm getting old, man." And he was probably 24 at the time. And I'm sure, you know what I mean? It's like, so you meet some people that are just old when they're young, and you meet some people that are young when they're old. So it's just, what do you think like gave you that mindset? Like your parents, or like just growing up? Had you always like sort of fought aging, or?
Well, I think I'm fortunate. You should knock on wood, right? Because you never know what's around the next bend. But I have my maternal grandmother just turned 103.
Wow.
And she was driving to work in her 80s until she got macular degeneration, and that was what took her off the road. But she was a dancer, an avid ballroom dancer her whole life, and it really showed. I mean, she was fully vital well into her 90s, and that was a big lesson for me. And ironically, she's still kicking along pretty well, but when she got macular, that changed her ability to move right on with independence, and that really was the first time in my entire life's recollection that my grandmother started to seem, old. And so that was for me a big lesson in staying active and making sure that, you move to the bitter end.
We have something similar. My grandmother, I remember her, my great grandmother, she passed away, but she was also about 105. And I remember her dancing at her 100th birthday party. So pretty cool, actually. I have relatives at that kind of longevity,
So you and I have no excuse.
We got no excuse, my friend. Well, let me ask you, so as, like, talk to me about the amount of time somebody, let's say in their 20s, 30s, and on should work out on a daily basis to maintain. Would it be half hour a day? Is that a silly question? Is there a standard, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, the common, recommendation is 30 minutes, 5 days a week, right? That's sort of, what you hear out of the industry and out of, I think some of the, the presidential fitness, test. And I think that generally speaking, my experience is that if you kind of have a few different ways you can go. You can be one of the folks who likes a lifestyle exercise, like maybe walking or, jogging or biking. And if you're getting after that a half hour a day, at some, concerted level of effort, I think you're putting yourself in the top, 0.5% of Americans.
Wow.
And that should be more or less sufficient, as long as you're doing some variety of exercise. Because one of the mistakes that people make is that, if you say, "Oh, I'm a runner," and all you do is run, well, you develop some repetitive, first of all, you're really training only on the sagittal plane of motion for the most part out in front of you. And over time, you can develop some significant imbalances in the way that your body is equipped. So, if you take a couple of different exercise modalities, you do a little bit of resistance training, could be your own body weight, but you're doing calisthenics, and then you mix that with a cardiovascular activity like power walking or running or biking, and you just do it between 2 and 4 days a week consistently, week in and week out, you're in pretty good shape.
Randy, there's a problem in this country of obesity and things like that. You think that's simply because people are not working out enough? You think the diet might be involved as well, or what do you think along those lines?
There's a saying that you can't out train a bad diet, right? So
Wow.
there's no question that diet has a huge impact, not only on performance, but on function and longevity. I think probably the single biggest threat to the American population from an obesity standpoint is soda. You get, and believe me, I like my little mini Coca-Cola now and then, but it is the problem with sodas is that they deliver such high concentration of empty calories and sugar in a tiny format, and you don't realize that in a day, if you start to develop a soda habit, you can put down 3, 4, 5 sodas in a day,
Right,
without thinking twice about it, and that's a whole day's worth of food calories, right? And so without any nutritional component to go with them. So I think that that's one of the big areas that people ought to really be mindful of. And alcohol as well, right? Loaded with calories, so you gotta be mindful. You shouldn't have more than 1 or 2 glasses a day of whatever your beverage is at most. And then other than that, I don't think it's a big mystery. It's go longer on lean meats and things that are green, and shorter on things that are white, right? That's generally the rule of thumb that I try to use when whenever I'm deciding that I'm gonna cut a little goo.
No. I remember years ago running into a trainer, and he said to me, Dan, you have a choice. You can either eat right and work out and spend the time doing that, or you can spend the time in the doctor's office. It's your choice as you get older. And I thought, that's pretty true, and I've really seen that to be the truth. And I've seen patients come in that are just, overweight, and you start to talk to them about their habits, eating and drinking, and you find out that diet sodas are not something that they consider as wrong. They actually consider that as a healthy option, and I guess we both know that doesn't work too well.
Diet soda. I mean, you're just shifting one devil for another. It's diet soda is not a good substitute for a healthy beverage. Really the healthiest one of all is water, right?
Yeah.
If you actually can get yourself to drink your 6 to 8 ounces of 8-ounce glasses a day, you can solve so many of life's problems with water. And none of us, I'm a coffee guy, so I have a that's where my sweet tooth is coffee. And it's there's nothing wrong with coffee, except that if you find it substituting for water, then you're operating at a underhydrated state all the time, and that's not good for your body. So that's one of the things that I try to focus on more, is making sure that I at least match my coffee intake 2 to 1 with some water.
That's the one thing my wife is always yelling at me about, is not drinking enough water. But so let me answer it. So if we're looking to optimize our health, like, what would be the thing that we should pay the most attention to? Like, what would you say would be the holy grail of health? The one thing, if you would.
The one thing is movement. And I really do believe that. And I use that term deliberately, because I'm not going to tell you that it has to be any particular kind of movement, because if I do, I can give you my thoughts on how people should be moving, but what's more important is that they are moving. And so if your thing is walking, fantastic. Get out and do it. Get out and do it. If you want to get on your bike, it doesn't matter. You just have to make sure that on a daily basis, you are getting up and moving your body. And, to the extent that you want to go a level deeper, make sure that you're doing things that stretch your range of motion. Do some stretching that keeps your hips mobile. Don't allow your mobility to become constrained over time through lack of practice. I look at movement as a little bit like brushing your teeth, right? You don't brush your teeth so that your teeth get big and strong. Brush your teeth so they don't rot out and fall out of your mouth, right?
Right.
And movement is no different. You gotta brush those joints and sinews and tendons and muscles on a daily basis with movement in order to keep them supple and functional.
Awesome. I got to say, this is a great interview. Let me ask you a couple more questions and we're starting to wind down. But what is your favorite health resource to recommend to the audience?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You mean in terms of reference material?
Yeah, just anything that you think that would be important to use as reference.
Well, I think the popular fitness magazines are decent. I think they tend to focus too much on vanity rather than function. The American Council on Exercise, their website does some great stuff. TRXtraining.com. We talk an awful lot about movement and how to maintain strength and function. The beauty, Dan, of a wired universe is that there's this search bar in Google,
right,
and type in something you want to know, and damn if you don't get 10 pretty authoritative answers. So I have to think you stumped me a little bit with that one, because I kind of consume from a lot of different vehicles. Hey, Men's Health. I've been reading Men's Health since I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And I still find something in there interesting every time I crack that thing open.
Well, there's so many different resources and stuff like that. So I think what you're saying too is like just really look at a broad area of knowledge, just start to really learn about different areas, and then take what you need away from that. And I think people are going to take away a lot from this show, because I think it's awesome, and it definitely puts us on the right track to finding the Holy Grail of health. Let me ask you, sir, where could people find out more about you? Where would they be able to learn a little bit more about you, get in touch with you?
Well, so our website is trxtraining.com, and then we have a great, very active social presence on Facebook at TRX Training, Instagram TRX Training, and Twitter the same. And then personally, I have my stuff at Randy Hetrick. But it's we love it when people get on. We have about 1 million really active social followers on our social platforms, and we have great discussions and debates and lots of interesting stuff. So please do come and check us out. And I think that we talk about making your body your machine, and I'll leave you with that thought, Dan, that it's a great way to think about your health, because a lot of people pay a lot more attention to their cars and the maintenance of their cars than they do to their own body, which is crazy, right? They get the oil change, they keep them looking good, they keep them clean, and then they don't give the same courtesy to their own human body. So when I tell people to make your body your machine, that's what we mean. Do what it takes on a daily basis to keep your machine running well, and it will serve you long into your life, hopefully to the very last day.
Randy Hetrick, thank you so much, sir, for being on the show. I want people to go out, check out your device, the TRX, and what a great interview. I thank you so much, sir.
Yes, sir. Pleasure talking to you. Thanks for doing what you do to help people.
This episode is sponsored by New Jersey Foot and Ankle Center in Oradell, New Jersey. Remember, when you have a foot problem, you've got a foot doctor in the family. Weekend and evening appointments are available. Call us at 201-261-9445. Once again, that's 201-261-9445. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes over at drdanspeaks.com. If you're loving the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time. Voiceovers for this episode were provided by Randy Ramos Jr. To see and hear more of his work, visit randyramosjr.com.